Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, who is in Normandy. That's right, because we're recording this on the 6th of June, which, come on, be honest. It's, what? All right, 6th of June, 1940. Is that why you're there, Jim?
No, it is. It's 4 years on. It's got to be said. I've been here because they've been naming a new street. There's a new housing development on a site that was once a zigzag of German trenches and shell craters. Is now going to be a modern housing development, and it is going to be the Rue des Sherwood Rangers.
Really? Oh, that's wonderful.
Rue Sherwood Rangers, yes. So we've had some absolutely fantastically comic ceremonies today.
Yeah.
So the first one was down by the old gun casement at Le Hamel.
Yeah.
At the western edge of Jig Green of Gold Beach, the western half.
Yes. Yeah.
And basically we had the French mayor of Anel, someone translating for him, then lots of reef laying, then a bugler from the American female bugler from the 101st Airborne.
Oh, lovely.
Don't ask me why. Did a very good job. Absolutely beautiful. Then we all sang. The national anthem, but with accompanying music that was dirge-like in its lack of speed, and everyone really struggled to say the words because everyone sort of finished. And then we went on to the Marseillaise, which I'd never seen the words before ever consciously. So we had all that. And then an hour later, we moved to the new road. About 300 yards away, and we did literally the same thing all over again.
Right, oh, brilliant.
There was the French mayor again, then we had dignitaries, then we had reef laying, then we had the bugler again, and then we had the dirge-like national anthems. It's really, really, really funny. Really funny.
Well, I mean, we have to be brutally honest here. When put up against the Marseillaise, the British national anthem, God save the Queen.
It falls a bit. It falls a bit.
I think it loses. It's not a fair fight, really.
No, I mean, onwards, bataillon.
Exactly.
Onwards,
arms, citoyen. It's fantastic.
Citoyen. Stuff. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
We were all sort of really struggling to keep in tune with the bad music, and the funny thing was, everyone said exactly what you just said.
Really?
It really was funny.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's not.
But in between, we've been on the site, and I got up very early this morning, and so what I managed to do is, by looking at all those aerial photos that I got very obsessed with, you can then match them to Google Earth.
Yeah.
Because there's always enough features on the 1944 photographs that enable you to completely perfectly marry up the two.
Yeah.
To Google Earth now, and the great thing about Google Earth is it's got a measuring thing on it.
Right.
So do you remember that picture of Aberdeen from A Squadron landing?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The very
famous with the crater and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So you work out where the crater is, then you translate that onto Google Earth, and then you measure it from a key place. So you can go, okay, from WN36, which is now car park sur plage Merveille.
Yeah.
You can work out that first crater is 835 metres from WN36, and the second one is 888.
Wow.
So you then mark it exactly on your Google Maps with a little waypoint.
Yeah.
And you walk there, and when you're on exactly the same spot, you're on exactly the same spot.
That's
and
fantastic.
I've worked out that Monty Hawley's tank that was knocked out, was the first tank to be one of the first tanks to be knocked out in B Squadron.
Yeah.
Was 232 metres from the embouchure of the anti-tank gun at Lamhow. So I could then paste that out and look at that and work out exactly where his tank had been on Gold Beach. It was absolutely amazing and profoundly moving, because normally when you go to Gold Beach, you're there and you sort of go, well, they all came sort of shore, sort of over there somewhere. And you sort of point in the kind of general direction. But now you can put it absolutely on the spot.
That's amazing.
So I've been doing little podcasts on the spot and having great fun doing that. And I had a great time yesterday finding Keith Douglas, where his grave was and everything, and where he'd been killed and initially buried, and that was also fascinating. And I suddenly, because of course when I was writing Brothers in Arms, I couldn't go up to point 103.
No, of course not. No.
Do any of this stuff. I've been there before, but I hadn't picked over it with those aerial photographs.
Yeah.
And now I've got I'm on the ground and I've got the aerial photographs and I've got Google Earth. And again, you can work it all out. You can see exactly. Suddenly, you can see why they took the route they took. And the reason they took the route that they took is because it's actually lower. It's the ridgeline falls away, which you can't see obviously from an aerial photograph. And the reason it's lower and they've taken that route is so they can't be seen from the village of Adroit.
It's basically dead ground. They can hide.
It's dead ground.
That's
and suddenly you go, of course. So I've had a great learning time. It's been absolutely brilliant.
I mean, in another edition of Brothers in Arms, would you like tweak accordingly? Is it enough to put some changes in, or are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing major. It's a sentence here, it's a sentence there. I mean, it's a tiny thing. But I mean, if Bill Scott Carter publisher will let me, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Just that tiny little adjustment. Having obviously our trip a couple of weeks ago to Arnhem. That's what that makes you think, isn't it? Is when you actually see the ground properly. That makes you go, oh, hang on a minute. On the subject of which, I'm reading Windy Gales. We've got Windy Gales.
Oh
with
yeah,
the 6th Airborne Division in Normandy.
I've got that.
I've recorded a track for I've recorded a chapter of it for our Patreons, which will be up. But basically, he keeps coming to this question of time and concentration of force. And basically, all of the battalion commanders on the night of D-Day, all the parachute battalion commanders on the night of D-Day, at some point make a decision where they go, right, I've got enough people, I'm going. Well, I'm going where I've got to go. Right. Some of the battalions are at half strength, 60% strength. Right, okay, that's enough. That's enough waiting around. We've got to go. And that's really interesting.
That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah. Which after all is epitomised by Otway at the Mayorville Battery, where he goes, oh well, I've only got a quarter of the people who are supposed to turn up, but we've got to get this done, so let's get on with it. And that's really interesting. However, also Lawrence Wright, who's a glider pilot, absolutely amazing. Who's a big figure in the glider pilot regiment. Who's the sort of another polar opposite to Chatterton. What he says about he's asked by Urquhart to consult on the decision of what landing zones to pick at Arnhem, and he says it was not for the air side, not even for Holly or Lee Mallory, to say whether greater losses would be suffered in landing on bad ground near their objective in a flak area than in fighting several miles towards it with the force initially intact. That was for Urquhart to judge, and he chose the latter. So Lawrence Wright says,
"Wow,
Urquhart chose the landing zones." We were soon writing our orders.
And who would he have been talking to? And who would Urquhart have talked to about that?
Well, that's his own division.
His most experienced brigade commander, probably.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
He was, of course, fully aware of the basic dilemma. Although his initial force, with the advantage of surprise, might assemble successfully at an objective so distant, the protection of the zones for the next day's landings would require all the glider-borne troops in the first lift, leaving only the lightly armoured reconnaissance squadron and 1st Parachute Brigade to hold the bridge for 24 hours. We shall be too thin on the ground, he predicted, and he reopened the question of landing gliders on the polder, blah, blah, blah. But basically, he says, in the end, it's Urquhart's call. What they, how they decide to skin that cat. Which is interesting. And, it's another...
It is interesting.
Another point of view. Anyway, but how busy is it in Normandy? Is it a busy anniversary? Or is it quite quiet?
It's interesting. Yeah, no, it's quite quiet, I'd say. There's a fair, there's a fair number of Jeeps and Harley Davidsons going around and a few trucks and what have you. I don't know. I drove down yesterday from Cherbourg and there was a sort of...
In the Dodge,
there were
right?
lots of, sort of Jeeps up in there was a sort of jamboree going on at St Mary-Église, as there always is on these things, and there was some sort of drop zone, and there were lots of people. There were lots of sort of slightly overweight 50-year-olds wearing, 101st, 82nd Airborne jump jackets and trousers and boots and everything.
Yeah.
And I suddenly thought, you have a pageant, don't you, for a monarch who's been on the on the throne for 70 years, and that's sort of okay. But having a pageant for D-Day every year, I don't know. I just suddenly, because I suppose I was sort of, I spent yesterday afternoon looking for Cleve Douglas's grave and for Peter Pepler's grave, and so I was feeling contemplative and slightly sombre. And I suddenly lost patience with people being with frippery. Do you know what I mean? I suddenly thought, oh, it just seems a bit sad, sort of, it's one thing, I don't mind people driving around a Jeep. Hell, I've got a Dodge, but
yeah.
I don't know, the whole dressing up thing, it just seems a bit weird to me. I don't know. I kind of slightly lost patience with the whole kind of sort of razzmatazing it.
It's the bit I've never really got, is the truth. And I've always sort of, I don't understand the impulse, to, especially men in their 40s and 50s, to dress up as screaming eagles. I mean, or all Americans.
It's just a bit weird. I mean, it's one thing if you kind of, it's not really, it's a bit weird. I mean, I think Monty's men just do it so well, because when they do it, they want to understand a flavour of what it was like to live under those conditions, living out, digging in holes, having crap toothbrushes and crap toothpaste and, all that kind of stuff, and corned beef. And I sort of understand that, because what they're doing is they're getting a taste of the experience of the British Tommy in training. Yeah. And that's fine, isn't it? I mean, I sort of think that's okay.
Yeah.
And they are good, and they're learning from it. That they're learning from the process of doing, of understanding. And I think that's fine.
I mean, I think if the people who are there today,
but I think there's a difference.
I think if the people who are there today are still there in 3 weeks' time, sleeping in a ditch, then we give them a pass, right? Is that what we're saying?
A bit, yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I've met some, I've met some fans of the show, which has been lovely.
Oh, great!
And, they've been coming up and talking to me and accosting me and what have you. And I've met a lovely guy called Stefan, who's he runs a museum at Tilly-sur-Seulles, and is also he's the regional tourist man for Normandy, and he's fascinating and really interesting, and talking about all the civilians that lost their lives in Tilly-sur-Seulles, and the more civilians dying than Germans on D-Day and all this kind of stuff. Again, that made me think, and that was all very interesting. I mean, one thing I would say is that, the forecast was absolutely terrible today, and I was sort of thinking, oh yeah, proper 6th of June weather this. But actually it's been glorious, and Normandy just looks so lovely at this time of year. It's so peaceful. And one thing I do think is really good is, you sort of think about what were they all fighting for? Well, they were fighting for that, weren't they? Yeah. Return of normal life, and people going around doing their stuff, and, people dressing up in their 50s as 82nd Airborne, driving around a Jeep if they want to. That's freedom, right? I mean...
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's what you do with your freedom is up to you, of course. That's it, yeah. Unfortunately, that's the catch, unfortunately.
but it was it's been interesting, and it is always a privilege to be there on the anniversary, and I mean, because anniversaries are sort of pointless in one level, but on another level they cause you to stop and think, don't they? And it's and it's moving to be there on Gold Beach, looking out to sea, knowing that 78 years ago there was so much sort of mayhem and confusion and cacophony of sound and smell and all the cliches going on.
Well, Akak Aitchison sent me a Spotify playlist of excerpts of Churchill, and then Monty, but then a load of reportage of people talking on D-Day.
Nice.
And Chester Wilmot in his glider.
Yes,
he went in, with 6th Airborne. And you hear that what's so interesting about it is you can tell he's very excited, but you can also tell he's trying to be, I'm trying to stay on top of the situation, is the way he's sort of describing it. And he's also, yes, of course he is. And you can hear the with the wind through the glider.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is
that's amazing.
On his microphone. I'm standing between the two pilots now, and, or we're floating above the aircraft towing us. It's all this sort of thing. And
I'm definitely going to have a listen to that
but
tomorrow.
What's so interesting, though, is he talks about it's the sort of the grammar of the commentary. So he says, none of these chaps have any illusions about what they're getting into, but none of them are overawed and all that. So he's saying all the things that maybe they're bromides, but they're also the things that are true, but also the things that need to be said. Every now and again, from the back of the glider, I hear snatches of song and all this sort of thing. When I went down there earlier, they were singing Rule Britannia and all this sort of thing. And you kind of think, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but this is what we need to hear. And it's the most fascinating point for Reportage to sit at, because he's got so many, as a reporter, And, and he went to write that fantastic history of victory in the West, because he was basically then attached himself to Monty's TAC HQ, didn't he? And had access to go everywhere and all this sort of thing. But basically, the way he's commentating on it is so interesting because he's doing so many jobs all at once. He's telling you, he's describing it to you, but he's also like reassuring the people at home who might think my son's on one of those gliders. And he's, he's not giving any security information away and all that sort of thing. Although, interestingly, Gale got all of the embedded journalists in. And embedded is an anachronism. That's not what they were. But he got all of those guys in, and the day before briefed them on what was happening, so that they would be able to report. He wanted them to be able to understand when they saw something that might be strange or apparently unnecessary, that it had its role in what they were trying to achieve. So he briefed them. He briefed the journalists on what was going on. And what's also really interesting, fascinating, the stuff about the preparations for D-Day for 6th Airborne, is that everyone in the division was briefed on everything. So they were all told exactly what their objectives were, what the division's objectives were, and all the way down, so that because you might get lost, if someone said, well, we're off to the bridge at the Deve or whatever, you'd know what that meant. And if they decided to take you with you, you'd go. And this understanding of the division's objectives as part of how he would brief his men. And he says, I like the idea of briefing. I don't like the issuing of orders. What you do at a briefing is you give the order and then you have a discussion about how you're going to go about it afterwards. And a proper to and fro, like collegiate approach to meeting those objectives.
Isn't that interesting?
Absolutely fascinating. His style is so interesting, and then
that's not far off Mission Command, is it?
Well, no. And this is the thing, when you start looking through it, and he's also really interesting about the fact that airborne divisions can't be with their administrative tail, right, when they're preparing to go on a drop on an operation.
No, of course not.
So what you have is Brigadier Flavel or Flavel, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, who commanded 1st Para Brigade in North Africa. When that ends, he's sent back to the UK, and he sets up the Airborne Establishment Troops, right? And what they do is they're the cooks and cleaners that provide for the people about to go on an operation, who are airborne and so understand the culture and understand what's required, but who then don't come in the tail. And the divisional tail is sent by sea or by road, with the clerks and the cooks and the stuff that a normal division would have, but that isn't dropped in. So
the 43% of service corps, or whatever.
Exactly. So they deliberately set this thing up that would go into the camps, at Tarrant Rush or whatever, that would provide for the airborne, so that they could train and practice and rehearse on site with the RAF. But not be away, but not lack the sort of support mechanism that they need is really, really interesting. And it's interesting that it's Flavel, who's got the experience in North Africa, who's put in charge of that, because he knows what you're going to need before you go on an operation, because he's done one. And it's the recycling of people is really, really interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah,
fascinating. When you're talking about sort of, Germans will have mission command and Allies don't. Except.
You keep coming to it. Yeah.
Except the German troops that don't have mission command because they're all grunts from the Lost Battalions and they don't want to do it. Or except the kind of, your infantry battalion that's just arrived in theatre and none of them want to be there apart from kind of a couple.
Yeah.
So obviously they're not going to have mission command because they're not interested in having mission command. They just want to be led.
Yeah.
They're not interested in that initiative. But the moment you're looking at volunteers like the paratroopers and stuff, of course they've got mission command.
Yeah.
It's about thinking on your feet. It's about stepping up when you need to.
Orders, of course, have to be issued. They must, too, be clear, crisp and free from all ambiguity. But the atmosphere of briefing is what counts. In this briefing, the order comes first, then follows the discussion and explanation of the why and the wherefore of everything. That's Gale's command philosophy. which I think
Well, I would say that's pretty much how the Sherwood Rangers operate as well. They have their road groups at the end of the day, and they, these are the orders that tomorrow we've got to do this.
Yeah.
But how you do it is up to you. Okay, you're going to be with the 7th Duke of Wellington Regiment.
Yeah.
7th Battalion of the Duke of Wellingtons, and Major
this is what
Semkin,
we
you're on
need
your
you.
own.
This is what you need you to do. Now go and bash your heads together and figure out how you're going to do it.
Well, that's the whole point of an own group, isn't it?
Yeah. Fascinating, though.
It's not just to tell you. I mean, different people have different styles, and different people interpret these things in different ways.
Yeah.
So a much more sort of autocratic battalion commander might be much more kind of prescriptive.
Yeah.
But others, I mean, certainly like Stanley Christopherson, he was incredibly collegiate.
Yeah. Well, and that's
so. I don't buy any of this kind of hard and fast rule on any of this. I don't think you can say. One nation has mission command, the other.
But that's
doesn't.
but say
It's
within the British Army, that's also not just because the British Army has always been sort of decentralised in terms of the way it organises its training, and that its doctrine is its handing down, its creation of doctrine is a decentralised process necessarily because it's an imperial force. It's also to do with the fact that it's expanded really, really rapidly and massively. It's got all sorts of different people coming into it with different approaches to life. It's full of civilians suddenly who aren't part of the way the army does things necessarily, and bring their own experience because experience of management and experience of dealing with people in their their real lives, as it were, and that's also going to collide with the way the way an army might like to do things, or might say it likes to do things. After all, always there's this gap between how the army says it likes to do things and then how it actually does something. Yesterday, I was debating with Rob Lyman, and I were talking about something on Twitter, and this chap pops in and goes, "Oh well, this is the idea of systems and culture, right?" And he says that an institution has its culture, and then it has the systems it attempts to enforce, right? And culture eats. Or processes it tries to enforce. And he says culture eats process every single time. So in other words, the culture of the organisation, you can try and insert a process into an organisation, but if its culture won't let you, it won't let you. So what you have to do is create a culture, an ethos, and that's how you then get it to run a process. Right. Not the other way around. Because if you try to do the other way around,
but I think what you were just saying about the British Army also applies to the Americans.
Yeah,
and possibly even more so, where there's, an officer absolutely has authority, but it's much more egalitarian society in a society point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, I know obviously things are changing by 1944 in the British Army, but even so. But again, I think it's. I mean, it's interesting because, I've been thinking a lot about obviously, last couple of days about the Sherwood Rangers, because that's why I'm over here.
Yeah.
I sort of think about Stanley Christopherson taking over formally on the 15th. He takes over on the 11th informally, and then that's confirmed on the 15th.
Yeah.
And I think he has a conscious thought about how to do this. I'm going to do it differently, because his predecessor was Mike Laycock. Yeah. Mike Laycock was a legend in the regiment. First person to get an MC in tanks at the Battle of Alham Howe from 31st of August 1942.
Yeah.
But he's also known as Black Mike because he's got this ferocious temper and everyone's scared of him.
Yeah.
He's got a great sense of humour when he's chilled, but he can absolutely flip.
Yeah.
And I think that as they come out of the line on the 13th, this is 2 days after the kind of the hit on the regimental HQ which kills Laycock.
Yeah.
They come out of the line, they go to this place called Chuane, which actually I went through today, which was really interesting. And that's where John Semkin slept for 14 hours through the medium guns in the next orchard.
Yeah.
And I think in that time between him coming out of the line and being formally given command of the regiment on the 15th of June, I think Stanley has some quite serious thinking to do. And I think he thinks, right, I'm gonna embrace this. I do want to be the regimental commander because I'm ambitious, but I also think I can do a good job. And I'm going to approach this in a different way. I am always going to have a smile on my face. I am going to make sure that the morale of the men is always kept up.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that no one is scared of me, but everyone absolutely respects me. And when I say jump, people jump. But I'm going to do it through through trust and respect rather than coercion.
Well, maybe he's thinking,
and I think so it's a bit like Gale, isn't it? It's a different approach to leadership.
Yeah. Well, and is he thinking I won't get away with that because Laycock had the authority as having been around for ages and being the guy with the first MC in tanks, but I won't get away with bollocking people. I haven't got the authority.
Well, he's got DSO and an MC, so he's he hasn't got gongs himself.
But you know what I mean? Or maybe he's thinking more of the same isn't going to work. We're in a different situation.
Yeah, I suspect it's that. I think it's that. I think he's mature enough at 32, and he's been around the block enough. He worked in in a gold mine in South Africa before. Then he worked in the city. He's very sociable. He knows lots of people, and he's been around the block. And you can tell from his diaries and journals that it was ambitious for the regiment, because I think he thought that was the best chance they had of getting through unscathed by being good and trying to get better.
Yeah,
and I think he spent a lot of time thinking about all this stuff. And I think he thought, right, I'm going to be me. I'm going to make sure that we're a happy ship.
Yeah.
Above everything else, I'm going to look out for everyone. He put a great system around him. He never did anything that, he never asked anyone to do anything that he wouldn't be prepared to do himself. All those kind of things. But I think his approach to leadership was much more collegiate.
Yeah.
And I think it was incredibly successful.
Yeah.
For taking that approach and. Again, that just sounds a bit like Gale to me. And
yeah, it does, yeah.
As soon as you were saying all that stuff at the beginning, I was thinking, that's just really interesting. I've just been thinking about Stanley.
Yeah.
And I think I think there is so much latitude within the US Army and the Canadian Army and the British Army in Normandy, Northwest Europe. And I suspect that's also true for Italy as well.
Yeah.
For different approaches, different leadership styles, but also different approaches to how you fight. And as long as the kind of overall is the same, there isn't this centralisation of doctrine.
Yeah,
it is spread out, isn't it? It's a decentralised view of it, and I think it's
fascinating because after all, as you say, he's been around the block. He's managed people, he's worked with people, and civilians. So he's thinking, I've got civilians here to mobilise rather than I'm a soldier. How do I mobilise soldiers? He maybe is thinking, what have I learned on Civvy Street about how you mobilise? But, if he's been working in mining, he's had to deal with people working in difficult conditions, hasn't he? So he knows he knows that maybe the best way to motivate people like that is to treat them well,
Yeah.
And that maybe that's informing it, and maybe also the idea, if I come in and if I have a black temper, they'll think more of the same, and maybe that won't work. It's. Because after all,
I think he recognises he's got to be true to himself. He's got to be, he's a different character to Mike Laycock. He's not someone who suffers from kind of sort of black rages.
Yeah.
And I think he's seen enough commanding officers and been with the Sherwood Rangers long enough and seen enough different people come and go that he thinks, no, I'm going to do things my way, and I'm going to do it in a more relaxed manner. I'm going to maintain that authority, but I'm basically going to I'm going to have a nicer, kind of more humane approach to command.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly successful.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have that Christmas party for the people of Shinin in 1944, where they do dress up and have a sleigh and, dragged by a Stuart tank and all the men save their sweet ration to give to the local kids and stuff. That's absolutely come from him.
Yeah. And it's
it's really interesting. And then you think about someone like General Ivor Thomas, commander of the 43rd Wessex Division. Whoever everyone calls. They call him Von Tommer after Chief of Staff of the Africa Corps.
Yeah.
And others call him Butcher Thomas.
Yeah.
He's considered to be this incredible driver, a man of no sense of humour whatsoever. Dark moods and sacking brigade commanders left, right, and centre. But 43rd Wessex Division are still there at the end of the war, aren't they? And they're incredibly successful.
Well, in lots of ways, this reminds me also of Spike Milligan's two commanding officers. So there's Chater Jack, who's who makes sure they have Christmas parties, who looks after them, who knows everyone by name, who's his first. Battery commander, and then there's the fellow regimental commander, and then there's the fellow after him, which is when Milligan has his breakdown, And Milligan says about it, I'm sure he's a good soldier, but he just wasn't any good at looking after me. And he's all tempers and tirades and pull your finger out and sort yourself out and you're a shirker and all this sort of thing. In the way that Chater Jack, who precedes him, isn't. You know, this guy, I think he's Jumbo Simpson, I think his name is, I can't remember anyway. But Milligan doesn't like him, and the feeling's mutual, and the sort of all the kind of fun around it goes out of it when they get this new officer, which I think is really, really interesting. And then his breakdown follows, and maybe he'd have had the breakdown anyway. But it's the clearly that someone can come in and put their stamp on things, and that they've got the latitude to do that and the leeway, and that the army's sort of, you know, kind of baggy enough, flexible enough for someone to be able to do that. Is also, I think, is really interesting in itself. That, you know, I agree. That the army's that sort of flexible. Anyway, we're going to take a very short break, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hello everyone, my name is Ned Holland and my debut EP, Slow Down, has just come out on all streaming platforms. The fourth track on this EP is called Away, and it features the amazing Willow Murray, Al Murray's daughter, on the backing vocals. There's 5 songs, it's 18 minutes long. I really hope you feel you can listen to this. Head to my Instagram account at Neddy the Musician for more information. Thank you.
Those I love you, it's hardest thing to say. We don't want to upset you. We want you to stay, but on the after day, you just keep drifting on. Oh, there's nothing that'll stop you as you go further away.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And a quick reminder for those of you who are wondering what to do with your weekends in July. We have got a fantastic festival for you. We Have Ways Fest. I'm sure many of you have heard us wang on about this, but here we go. This July, it's our second annual summer festival. We Have Ways Fest. It's from the 22nd of July, which is a Friday, to Sunday, July the 24th. It's our own jubilee of military, platty-jubes of military chat. 3 tents, all about the best Second World War historians coming to talk about their specialisms. Max Hastings on Churchill, Rana Mitter on the war in China, Katrin Himmler on being a descendant of a senior Nazi. 40 speakers in all, including grassroots speakers in the form of Andy Akak-Aitchison talking about his beloved 52nd Lowland Division. We've got 50 plus
Chatterton.
And Andy Chatterton to talk about the stay-behinds. I mean, Rob Lyman, an essential list is endless of people. We've also got 50 plus military vehicles, including a T-34, Sherman's, a Centaur, and a Grant. And every evening, to close proceedings, we'll be firing a 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun into the night sky. There'll be lots to eat and drink.
It'll be following the searchlight.
Exactly. With the searchlight, exactly. For details on speakers, hardware, how to get there, what's going on, and the general vibe, which was very, very agreeable last September, go to wehavewaysfest.co.uk. That's wehavewaysfest.co.uk. There we go. Our commercial
we've got some interesting ales coming, haven't we? We've got the Flying Dustbin.
Yes, we've got Flying Dustbin. I fancy a pint of Flying Dustbin. I don't know about you.
I do too. I fancy. We've got Craft with 2 F's pills.
Yes, which is
after a certain villain.
Yeah, absolutely one of the villains of the piece.
Craft, and we've got Jumping Jim Gavin ale.
Yeah, Jumping Jim Gavin ale, and the labels for these are being done by one of our regulars,
Paul Davis.
Paul Davis, who's done an amazing job. The Jumping Jim Gavin label is fantastic.
Yeah, he's coming at a very high bar.
And the idea is, as well as the speakers, we get together, we chat. We'll be around. You can come and bend our ear about whatever you want to talk about.
All the speakers will be around, won't they?
In fact, all the speakers will be around, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you there. There we go.
No, it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, heavy plug
a lot
ends.
Of fun.
Now, Jim, how did you get to? Did you go to Cherbourg?
Yeah, I went Cherbourg, Paul Cherbourg, took the Citroen over, absolutely purred all the way down, back on home turf, very, very happy. And, it's lovely being back here. And for the first time since I've been back here, I mean, I came back here in March with actually quite a lot of IC members, but for the first time, it feels proper again. It feels normal. It feels, no one's wearing masks. You don't have to wear a mask anywhere. it just feels back to normal.
Good.
And you can see people sort of breathing a sigh of relief about it all.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, no, it's been really, really lovely. I just can't tell you how much I enjoyed. I mean, if people tune in, you'll hear the podcast I recorded yesterday. But I really, really just found it so fascinating. Really picking over point 103. You know, there's this key bit of high ground for the Sherwood Rangers and 8th Armoured Brigade and 50th Division. And in the big scheme of things, it's a nothing action. But there's a joy about learning about something very specific, I think. Yeah. And seeing it as a kind of sort of leitmotif for the wider battle that's going on in Normandy. And poring over one bit of ground, because inevitably when you're in Normandy, what you do is you rush from one beach to another, and 1 minute you're in Omaha, and then you're in Gold, and quickly sort of have a quick look at a museum, and then you go through the kind of tourist trap of Pont-le-Hoc, and occasionally you go inland and you've got I don't know, an hour at Hill 192 above Saint-Lô or something like that if you're really adventurous. But there's very little time to properly pore over it. Yeah. And as you know, I just got so excited about these wartime photographs because they're so illuminating, and photographs don't lie. Yeah. And you can see and matching things up and really trying to go, and suddenly things start to make sense in a way. I know we keep going on about it, but it's when you're there and you've got these three different sources. You've got your own eyes. You've got so you can absorb what it is that the landscape that you're in and how it relates to other bits of other landscape. Yeah. Then you've got wartime photographs plus records such as war diaries and people's personal diaries and stuff. And then you've got Google Earth as well. So, and when you put that whole jigsaw together, suddenly there is this moment of clarity, and that's what I had yesterday, and that was really thrilling. And I sort of had little moments of that as well at when we were in Arnhem and Nijmegen. Yeah. There's little moments like in the wood north of way to the north where 4th Brigade got hammered. Yeah. And we were on the edge of where was it? T Company, wasn't it? R Company. Yeah. Tim Timothy. Yeah. North of the drop zone, and I suddenly just stood there, and I just suddenly thought, I get this now. Yeah. In a way that I hadn't before, and those moments that they're worth so much more than the 5 seconds they take for the penny to drop. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that they last, they linger with you, and they prompt further thought and contemplation, and pieces start to fall together. But that walk up to Dane Brink and then back when we were in Arnhem suburb, that one between the railway, I mean, so many things happen on that Tuesday, including after they've been forced out of the museum, the South Staffs are then ordered to take Dane Brink, and not only that, but 11 Power have been sent down to, is it 10 or I can never, is it 10 or 11 who've been sent down to the town, right? They're waiting in the open, and they've been told you're going to back the Staffs up, so they're waiting in the open. Then they're told they're not. And they're waiting to put an attack in that road between the hospital and that stretch of road by the railway line and round the back of the hospital. They're basically formed up, waiting to go. They're told they're told to go. They're told to stop in backing the South Staffs. Then they're told, and this is where they get caught out and destroyed. Then they're told to attack across the railway line in order to meet up with the rest of 4th Brigade. And you think, who must be there? Who will surely be there by now? Is the thinking? And they're nowhere near. And of course they're nowhere near. And it's this sort of, you think, God, bloody hell, the how disjointed it is. But once you've seen where it happened, the confusion is sort of because actually those things are far enough away. All those different places are far enough away from each other for people to be isolated and not know what's going on around them. And so on, you know what I mean, and I just maybe that's also one of the challenges of leadership is to try and make things as clear as possible. Yeah. In times of confusion and mayhem, and keep people on a path. Yeah. And actually, that's a very good reason for not having too rigid an order, isn't it? Because things are always changing all the time, which is why you need to think on your feet and why you need to kind of be able to respond to things rather than and also be sent in to do something where the evidence that that's the right decision is really flaky. But also, I was also really struck by that whole thing about Bill Simpson, US 9th Army. Yeah. Making sure that he personally spoke to his corps commanders every single day. Yeah. Come what may. End of the day, they have a chat. It's such a simple thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But then, I mean, but you've got a clarity of aim, because what happens in the town there is they can't make up their mind what they've got to do. And
because they thought they knew what they had to do.
That's not working.
And that's all gone awry. So plan B and C, they're sort of slightly rabbits in headlights, aren't they?
Yeah. But I mean, what's very interesting is, Gale does do some rushing about on the night of D-Day, which is very interesting.
Does he?
Yeah. So he goes down to make he gets out of his glider. They can't get the Jeep out the glider. They abandon that. So they're on foot. Kindersley, who's the commanding officer of 6th Air Landing, he's come down on the night of D-Day ahead of his brigade, so that he knows what's going on before they turn up, which is quite interesting. With his headquarters, so he's ready for his brigade to arrive with the second lift in the evening, right? Which I think is an interesting way of approaching the whole thing. But Gale goes down to the bridges, to check on what's happening with 7 Power and having relieved the bridges, to find out what's going on. And he does a fair bit of finding out what's happening, so he knows what's going on, even though he knows everyone's shorthanded and it's chaotic, and that the Germans are pretty well prepared to counterattack. And what's really interesting also is he basically says, and the tone of his book is very interesting, because it's not a How I Won the War book at all.
Right.
It's all quite pared down, and it's not like, it's not.
I've got it. I've just never read it.
It's not got any of that. Had it not been for me in it, it's not got any of that stuff, right?
Good.
But he
That's
basically,
refreshing.
well, exactly. But he basically says, here are the 2 points I was anxious about. This is what we expected the Germans to do. And they did it. They did what we'd anticipated. So he says, we're expecting a push up the Benneville side, of the canal, and then we're expecting a push up from Colombelle towards Ronville. And he said, until 3rd Division arrived, the former is the one I was really worried about, because that could detach the division from being relieved. But that kind of happens, but doesn't materialise in any proper strength. Then the second attack, that materialises in the morning, but they're able to deal with it. It's fascinating. But he said, basically, what I was expecting is everyone local to counterattack to the best of their ability. And that's and then some higher up decision about what to do about us by the German command would happen later on D-Day itself. And that's basically what happens. And his anticipation, is all fairly sound. His basic problem though is that everyone's under strength, and that they're, everyone's operating at 40 to 60% of battalion strength, which is but they carry on anyway. Like I said earlier on, they go, oh well, right, we're off. Pinecoffin's like, right, we're off. That's it. That's what we've got to do. Johnston, all of them. Well, we're going to just have to get on with it, aren't we? Which I think is really, really interesting. Because they know time is of the essence. They've decided that's the one thing they've got into their heads.
I think this whole thing of this has been a really interesting discussion, isn't it, about leadership and how you respond to different situations and stuff. And I the other thing I was sort of thinking about today is just, for frontline troops, the mental and physical stress and strain of being in the line too long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that the battles and actions tend to seem, for one unit, tend to last between 4 and 6 days, and usually 4 days.
Yeah.
Because after that, you just can't function.
Yeah.
And then imagine you're kind of, you're 23 and you've got a company to command, and you've got to make all these decisions. You're really short of sleep, and all you want to do is go home and lie on crisp sheets, and someone bring you a cup of tea and a cold flannel to put on your forehead. And you can't, and it's so awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it is
how these people did this. We sit here, kind of 80 years on, sort of going, well, of course, you made a terrible decision there. And,
I know.
It's like, well, you freaking do it then.
Well, this is very often how I feel. I sort of end up wanting to shy away from saying, well, he screwed that up, because God knows it's like when we were talking about Melemy the other day, about surrendering the high ground there, And I'm thinking, the pressure poor bastard was under, I've never been under that. I've never been under anything. Yeah, I know it's still a terrible decision, which is what you said, right? But the thing is, I've never been under any kind of pressure vaguely resembling any of this. That's one of the things when I was starting to write this, the first introduction I wrote to the book that went in the bin was basically like, I feel very dubious about judging any of these people, right? Because they're dealing with pressures wildly beyond anything I've ever. People say
I've had some fraught moments being chairman of the Chalk Valley Cricket Club.
But this is, people go, how you're so brave being a stand-up comedian. I'm thinking, no, I am not.
No. Let me tell you what's brave.
Yeah, exactly.
Different form of courage. Aaron.
No. An entirely unrelated disease. Wanting to be a stand-up comedian. It's nothing to do with being brave. It's about having some sort of personality flaw. I mean,
I don't know. It's just recently, we've done a lot. We looked at that Paul Fussell essay.
Yeah.
We've been to Arnhem and Nijmegen. We've been looking at kind of Gavin's decision cycle. I've been thinking about Stanley Christopherson and the squadron commanders of the show with Rangers today. You've been reading Windy Gale. It's just so absorbing, isn't it? It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And they're all different but the stresses and pressures and strains that these guys are under are just fearsome, aren't they? I mean,
yeah.
It's been fascinating doing this, just pausing and thinking about all this, because a lot of the stuff we've been doing over the last 3 weeks or so has been about individual decision making.
Yeah. I guess because actually, that's the thing I've been really thinking about. We actually ended up talking about Browning and Gavin make that decision about the Bridget Nijmegen. It's not Gavin, it's not Browning. The pair of them make it. Now, how's that process? Because after all, Browning. Maybe he's taking the advice of his junior, which is what you're supposed to do, isn't it? You ask the guy who's close to the ground and then you make a decision. So maybe it's Gavin's decision and Browning's endorsing it. Or is it Browning handing the decision down? Or is it the two of them going, well, golly gee, what's the most important thing, the high ground? We don't know. And very often we approve of people. In management culture, you're supposed to approve of juniors taking the initiative and making their own decisions, aren't they? Yeah. Aren't you? You're supposed to encourage it. You're supposed to foster it. You're supposed to think it.
Otherwise, how can they ever be trusted with their own?
Precisely. So maybe that's what Browning does. Is he goes, I concur. You're absolutely right. You're the guy on the ground. You know what your capabilities are more than anyone else. So you make that. I'm totally fine with that, Jim. But that's presented as Browning. By some, that's seen as Browning like going, do as I tell you. And the same thing with when we were talking about Urquhart consulting with Lathbury. We were talking about this on the live cast the other night. That Urquhart is with Lathbury in Arnhem. Lathbury's the most experienced brigade commander in the brigade by a really long way.
Yeah.
And so
clearly he's going to have an influence, isn't he?
He's going to have an influence. And so who... is that a bad? I mean, it's a wrong decision, but did they arrive at it the wrong way, or did they arrive at it the right way? Because after all, that's there's all that too, isn't there? And Lathbury knows his guys better than anyone else, especially if Urquhart's from out of town, as he's always portrayed. So, he's doing the right thing by delegating, which is so he can sit above and make higher decisions.
Yeah.
It's which is after all, had everything gone right, we'd be talking about what brilliant devolved leadership that was.
That's true.
If that's what it was.
Of course, if you're talking about decision making and leadership on D-Day, then one of the biggest is obviously on the morning of 4th of June with the rain slating down, and he's got to make the decision. Eisenhower's got to make the decision. Everyone in the room in the library at Southwark House is looking at him.
Yeah.
And he holds his head in his hands, thinks for a minute, and then looks up and goes, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big decision.
Well, but then look at the the other side, you know, how bad are they at making decisions about? I mean, after all, we keep the mission commanders.
I really need to go and see my wife.
But exactly, it's my wife's birthday. Sorry, lads, I'm out of here. You know, I mean,
hasta la vista. I'm off to see
exactly, and we're not going to wake the
see
boss
my
up.
wife and the Führer.
Exactly, I'm not going to wake the boss up until after lunch. I mean, it's you know, when because after all, why do we talk about Mission Command? Because people have talked about Mission Command, you know, which is the era of Alpha Tactique, yet the terrible decision making going on by the people who supposedly possess this magic way of doing
That's actually brilliant at making decisions. Yeah. That's very true.
You know, the
very true.
sort of ironies that ping around in that, you know, that after the war, looking to the Germans for answers to how you do things. Well, what you don't do is go home for your wife's birthday and leave the decisions to a politician.
Well,
you know,
it's amazing how often senior commanders are missing at crucial moments.
Yes,
and, when they attack and Operation Diadem and all that.
Well, that ultra, one of the ultra books suggests that there's something going on there. There's a Allied smoke and mirrors thing in that.
Anyway, I need to go and eat some escargot and some Calvados, drink some Calvados or whatever.
Jammy git.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's all right for some. Well, thanks, Jim.
Where are you off to? Where are you off to this week then?
I am in Carlisle on Wednesday, and then
nice.
And I haven't memorised the rest of my diary. Let me. I can't bear.
Well, if you're driving out to Carlisle, you can go to that really nice service station.
Yeah, I'm getting the train. Carlisle, Hull, Birmingham, and then I'm off to the south of France on the weekend.
Woo!
Yeah,
very nice.
Yeah. Don't forget, we have waysfest.co.uk if you fancy coming to see our festival and seeing us do this in the flesh. You can endure this kind of freewheeling conversation for real.
Oh yeah, and also I've just today, the day of recording, we're announcing that my Brothers in Arms tour. We're going from Calshot, where they embarked, all the way through to Karlshofen.
Amazing.
In a little village where the war ended for the Ceremonies. We're literally doing everything, and that is this October, and you can find that on tripsmiths.com. Okay, brilliant. Well, there we've done our hustle. Thanks for listening, everybody. Jim's off out to eat tripe de camp and drink himself senseless with delicious Norman cider, I expect. We'll see you again really soon. A little glass of cidre. Yeah. All right, cheerio. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Au revoir.